The sun was dipping low over the rolling hills of Willow Creek, casting a golden glow across the sprawling 50-acre ranch that Caleb Whitaker called home. The air smelled of fresh hay and wildflowers, and the distant lowing of cattle carried on the breeze. Caleb, a rugged man in his early 40s with calloused hands and a weathered Stetson, leaned against the porch railing of his modest farmhouse, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. His border collie, Rusty, lay at his feet, ears twitching. At the sound of a tractor humming in the distance, Caleb's ranch wasn't just his livelihood, it was his legacy. His grandfather had carved this land out of the wilderness, and every fence post, every barn beam held a story. The ranch wasn't flashy, but it was honest. Caleb raised Angus cattle, grew hay, and kept a small herd of horses for local rodeos. His pride and joy, though, was Goliath, a 2,000-pound Brahman bull with a temper as big as his bulk. Goliath wasn't mean, but he didn't take kindly to strangers, and Caleb liked it that way. The bull's sheer presence kept coyotes and trespassers at bay. Life on the ranch was peaceful, or at least it had been until the developers arrived. 2 years ago, the neighboring farm had been sold to a real estate company that promptly turned it into Willow Creek Estates, a gated community of cookie-cutter men. The new residents were city folk chasing the country dream without understanding what country life entailed. They complained about the smell of manure, the sound of roosters, and the sight of Caleb's old John Deere parked near the road. Worst of all, they'd formed a homeowners association, HOA, a group Caleb viewed as a bunch of busybodies with too much time and too little sense. The HOA's president, Karen Delaney, was the ringleader, a woman in her late 50s with a perpetually pinched expression and a voice that could curdle milk. Karen had moved to Willow Creek Estates from a high-rise condo in the city. She wore designer sunglasses and carried a clipboard like a weapon, always ready to enforce her vision of neighborhood standards. Caleb had met her once, when she'd marched up to his property line to complain about his unsightly barbed wire fence. He'd politely told her the fence was on his land and necessary for his cattle. She'd huffed and stormed off, but Caleb knew it wouldn't be the last he'd hear from her. Trouble started in earnest one crisp October morning. Caleb was mending a gate near the boundary between his ranch and Willow Creek Estates when he saw Karen's white SUV pull up on the gravel road. She stepped out, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 other HOA members, a nervous-looking man named Ted and a woman with a severe bob haircut who introduced herself as Linda. "Mr. Whitaker," Karen began, her tone dripping with condescension. "We need to discuss your property's impact on our community's aesthetic." Caleb wiped sweat from his brow and squinted at her. "Aesthetic, lady, this is a working ranch, not a golf course." Karen ignored him, flipping open her clipboard. "Your fence is an eyesore. The barbed wire is rusted, and it detracts from the curb appeal of our homes. Per our HOA bylaws, all boundary fences must be uniform and approved by the board." Caleb chuckled, shaking his head. "First off, I ain't in your HOA. Second, that fence is on my land, and it's been there since my granddaddy built it. It keeps my cattle in and your complaints out." Ted shifted uncomfortably, but Karen pressed on. "We're prepared to file a formal complaint with the county if you don't replace it with a white vinyl fence, as specified in our guidelines." Caleb's laughter died. "You're welcome to try, but the county knows this is agricultural land. Your fancy rules don't apply here." Linda piped up, her voice shrill. "It's not just the fence. Your tractor is visible from the road, and it's lowering our property values. And don't get me started on the smell of your animals." Caleb crossed his arms, his patience thinning. "If you don't like the smell of cows, maybe you shouldn't have moved next to a ranch. As for my tractor, it's parked on my property, and it's staying there. Now, I've got work to do, so unless you've got a warrant, get off my land." Karen's face reddened, but she didn't back down. "This isn't over, Mr. Whitaker. We'll be in touch." She spun on her heel, and the trio retreated to the SUV, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Caleb shook his head and went back to his gate. He figured Karen was all bark and no bite, but a nagging feeling told him she wouldn't let this go. Over the next few weeks, the HOA's complaints grew bolder. Caleb received a certified letter demanding he remove his dilapidated barn because it was visible from the community's entrance. Another letter cited the noise pollution from his roosters and threatened legal action. Caleb tossed the letters in a drawer, knowing they had no legal weight, but the constant harassment was wearing him down. Then came the trespassing. One evening, Caleb's security camera caught 2 figures skulking near his barn, measuring the distance to the property line with a tape measure. He recognized Karen's distinctive silhouette and reported it to the sheriff, an old friend named Mike Dawson. Mike paid Karen a visit, warning her about trespassing laws, but she played the victim, claiming she was protecting the community. Mike told Caleb to keep his cameras rolling and call him if it happened again. Caleb wasn't one to back down, but he was tired of the drama. He considered putting up a taller fence to block the HOA's view, but that would cost thousands, and he'd be damned if he let Karen dictate how he ran his ranch. Instead, he doubled down on his routine, making sure his tractor was parked prominently and letting Goliath graze near the boundary line, where his massive frame was impossible to ignore. It was a Saturday in early November when Karen crossed the line. Literally, Caleb had spent the morning moving hay bales and was in the barn repairing a saddle when Rusty started barking furiously. Caleb stepped outside, wiping his hands on his jeans, and saw a sight that made his blood boil. Karen, dressed in a tracksuit and wielding a pair of bolt cutters, was snipping through the barbed wire fence along the boundary. Behind her, Ted stood, holding a roll of white vinyl fencing, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. A pickup truck parked on the HOA's side of the road held more fencing materials, and Linda was unloading a post driver. Caleb strode toward them, Rusty at his heels. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen didn't flinch. "We're improving the property line. Since you refused to comply with our standards, the HOA board voted to replace your fence ourselves. You'll thank us when your property values go up." Caleb's voice was low and dangerous. "That's my fence, on my land. You're trespassing and destroying my property. Stop now, or I'm calling the sheriff." Karen smirked. "Go ahead and call. We have every right to maintain our community's aesthetic. The county will side with us." Caleb noticed something else. Karen had cut a section of fence directly in front of the pasture where Goliath was grazing. The bull, sensing the commotion, had lumbered closer, his massive head lowered. As he snorted at the strangers, Caleb's heart skipped a beat. Goliath wasn't aggressive, but he was territorial, and a 2,000-pound bull didn't need to be aggressive to cause chaos. "Lady," Caleb said, his voice tight, "you've got about 10 seconds to back off before this gets ugly. That bull behind you ain't friendly." Karen glanced over her shoulder, saw Goliath, and scoffed. "Oh please, it's just a cow. Now Ted, start digging the post holes." Ted hesitated, his eyes wide as Goliath pawed the ground. Karen, maybe we should." "Don't be a coward," Karen snapped. She snipped another wire, and the fence sagged. That was all Goliath needed. With a bellow that shook the air, the bull charged, his hooves thundering against the earth. Karen froze, her bolt cutters clattering to the ground. Ted dropped the vinyl fencing and bolted for the truck, screaming. Linda tripped over the post driver and scrambled away, shrieking. Caleb shouted, "Get out of there!" But it was too late. Goliath burst through the gap in the fence, his massive bulk barreling toward Karen. She stumbled backward, falling into the ditch on the HOA side of the road. Goliath skidded to a stop, snorting and tossing his head, but didn't pursue her further. He stood in the middle of the gravel road, glaring at the intruders. Caleb grabbed a rope from his truck and whistled for Rusty, who darted around Goliath, barking to keep him contained. It took 10 tense minutes for Caleb to coax the bull back into the pasture, using a bale of hay as bait. By the time he'd secured the gate, Karen was back on her feet, covered in mud and screaming about lawsuits. "You're insane," she shrieked. "That monster could have killed me. I'm suing you for everything you're worth." Caleb fixed her with a hard stare. "You cut my fence, trespassed on my land, and let my bull out. If anyone's suing, it's me. And I've got the whole damn thing on camera." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She grabbed her bolt cutters and stormed back to the SUV, Ted and Linda trailing behind her. The truck's tires spun on the gravel as they sped away. Caleb patched the fence with spare wire, but the incident left him furious. He called Sheriff Mike, who reviewed the security footage and issued a formal trespassing charge against Karen, Ted, and Linda. The HOA board tried to spin the story, claiming they were acting in good faith, but the sheriff wasn't impressed. He warned them that any further interference with Caleb's property would lead to arrests. The story spread like wildfire through Willow Creek.